These kinds of surreal scenes are my favorite types of environments to create. They are not realistic, so I'm not bound to make something that looks real. I can explore all the ideas I have. In this video, I'm gonna create this environment in Unreal Engine 5, so let's do it. The project file of the environment and the assets I've used to create it are available on my Patreon. The links are in the description. This video is sponsored by my Patreons. Thank you so much for making this happen. Up here, click on File and select New Level. Let's create a basic level and work from there. First, click on Save and give the level a name. Select where you want to save it and click on Save. I don't need the player start and I don't need the floor. Let's add a post-process volume to the level. I want to disable the auto exposure. In the details, search for Unbound and enable it. Now it affects the whole world. Search for exposure and set both min EV and max EV to 1. Now that the level is ready, we can start blocking out the environment. The inspiration for this environment came from one of my renders from a couple of years ago. I was looking at it a while back and I thought to myself, I can probably do it better now. Add a plane and move it to the origin of the world. Let's move it slightly up so we don't see the grid. 20 is enough. Now scale it up. Something like 200 is good. I want to create a passage with very large pillars on both sides. So I'll add a cube and move it to the origin of the world. The default cube is 1 by 1 by 1. I want it to be much larger than that, like this large. 2 meters by 20 meters by 100 meters. So set the Z scale to 100. Remember to disable the lock icon or it will scale it in all axes. Set the X scale to 2 and the Y scale to 20. I'll leave some of it under the ground. And let's add a character as a scale reference. The default mannequin is good enough. Move it to the origin of the world and then 20 units up so it's standing on the ground. Now let's place the pillars. Rename this one to Pillar 1 and press Ctrl D to duplicate it. Enable grid snapping from up here and set it to 1000. Move one of them 2 times to the left and the other one 2 times to the right. Now they are 20 meters apart. I want 16 of them on each side and each of them 10 meters apart. So let's duplicate them. Let's move the first and the last pillars next to each other. Set the snapping to 100 and move each one 200 units. That's enough to create the entrance on both sides. Copy one of the pillars and rotate it. Scale it like this and move it here. This acts as the outer wall. Copy and place it on the other side too. And that's enough for the blocking. Add a cine camera actor and move it around here. I want it near the entrance. Click on Perspective and select Cinematic Viewport. click again and select the camera to see through it. Let's set this Y location to 0 so it's right in the middle. I want it to use a wide lens. 15 is good. And let's set the current aperture to 22 so everything is in focus. This is the difference between a low aperture and a high aperture. Let's move it a little bit, and I think here is good. On the top right, we have some composition overlays. I mostly use the grid 3x3 or the rule of thirds. I want to place the intersection of the pillar and the ground in the background on this line. So let's move the camera up. 250 is good, and let's rotate it a little bit. Now this is looking good. I've made this environment a couple of times before recording. I know what I want. That's why I don't spend a lot of time on this stuff. So in your case, spend some time and move around the scene as much as you need to get the result you want. I wanted to catch the scale and massiveness of the space. The combination of the pillars, the wide camera lens, and the small character will give me just that. Let's duplicate the camera. The first one was a horizontal or landscape shot. This one I want to make a vertical or portrait shot. From here, select the second camera. In the Details tab, under Film Back, we should swap the sensor width and height. Let's increase the focal length to something higher like 25. And move the camera to somewhere else, like here. Let's set its Z location to 250 just like the other camera. It's not necessary, I just feel the result looks good. Reset the rotation and move it around the Z axis. Something like -10 looks good. In the end, when I want to render this shot, I'll place the character either here on this line or here on this line. We can use this shot for TikTok, Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts. Now that I'm satisfied with the composition, let's lock the cameras so I don't accidentally move them. In the outliner, select both of them and right click. Under Transform, enable Lock Actor Movement. Click here to get out of the camera view and select the default viewport. At first, the whole purpose of creating this environment was to showcase this material I had created. You can watch the videos on my channel to create it, or you can download it on my Patreon. The links are in the description. Make sure nanite tessellation is enabled for the project. For that, we need Unreal Engine 5.4 or later. Watch this video if you don't know how to enable it. First, we should create the ground mesh. So let's go into the modeling mode. If you don't have the modeling mode, make sure it's enabled in the plugins. Set the new asset location to the current folder, and let's open the folder we want to create the new mesh in, the meshes folder. Select rectangular and click on the ground to add it. Increase the width and depth to 1000 and the subdivision to 200. Click on accept. This is the new mesh. Let's copy the location of the ground and delete it. Paste the location on the new mesh and let's scale it until it encompasses the whole area. 18 is good. And don't forget to turn on nanite for the mesh. We want to use nanite tessellation. The material is exactly the same material I created in the other video. I've just added a parameter to control the normal strength. I'll even use the same material instance I created in the other video. So let's assign it to the mesh and open it. The displacement magnitude is too much. Let's set it to something like 1 for now. I'll adjust it better later. The texture size is too large too. Let's go next to the character to better see the scale. Decrease matte font size to something like 0.01. 0.02 looks better. Change the other material sizes too. Now let's vertex paint the road and the snow. I want the road from this side to the other side. We can add a little curvature to it too. Select the mesh and in the modeling mode, go to the mesh attributes section and select paint vertex color. Set the material mode to original material and let's make the brush smaller. 0.01 is good. Make sure only the red channel is enabled. Set the paint color to black and let's start painting the road. I'll go up here so I'll have a better look at the whole mesh. That's good, I think. Let's check it from here. Now enable only the G channel and paint the snow. Okay, that's enough for now. In the material, let's decrease the noise size. .25 is good. And let's tweak the height parameters a little. These are the final numbers. Let's go back to the vertex paint mode. To break the repetition, we can hold Shift and click to erase. We can also set the color to gray. 0.4 is good. And paint. Let's do it all over the ground. It's almost ready. Let's tweak the material parameters a little more. First, I want to increase the displacement magnitude. 2 is better, I think. Let's also increase the snow displacement. Right now it's kind of flat. Around 1.8 looks good. Now let's add some wetness and puddle to the ground. Increase the puddle height until we start to see it. The opacity is 0.4 right now. It appears to be muddy. Let's decrease it to make it more clear. And play with the wind ripple parameters. Okay, that's enough for the ground. That's all I'm gonna do on it. In the modeling mode, create a box. Before clicking on accept, I'll set its parameters. I want it to have a width of 20 meters, a depth of 2 meters, and a height of 100 meters. Make sure you're in the folder you want it to be saved in, and OK. From Xform, click on Edit Pivot and set the pivot to the center. Again, click on Accept. The reason I did that is because I want to replace the static mesh of these pillars. The default cube's pivot is its center, so to avoid extra work, I'll just set this one's pivot to its center. Now I can select all the pillars from the outliner and replace the static mesh with this one. Let's reset the scale and the material. That's better. Delete this one and scale the outer walls. Now let's create its material. I'll use the material I created in the height lerp video. I just added these two parameters to better control the noise, and these nodes to control whether I want to use the noise as the height texture. You can also download it on my Patreon. I've assigned concrete to matte 1 and dirty painted wall textures to matte 2. Both of them are from Quixel. So create a material instance and assign it to the pillars. The texture size is too large right now. Let's open the material instance and decrease it to something like 0.05. Set use noise as height texture to 1, and let's increase the height texture multiplier of matte 2 until we see the paint. Texture repetition is too obvious right now. To remove it, I'll make a material instance from this material instance. This one will be main controls, and this one will be noise controls. Open the noise control and only enable the size, offset and rotation of the noise. Duplicate it 5 times and assign them randomly to the pillars. Okay, now open them and change the noise parameters. We can control the other parameters from the first material instance, so if I decide to change the size or anything else, we don't need to go through 6 different material instances. Let's add some more detail to the material. I've downloaded an ancient writing image. We can use it as the height texture for the plaster. In Photoshop, I made it black and white and changed its size to a power of 2. It's useful for the meep maps. Always try to have power of 2 sizes for your textures. One other thing is that I changed the compression settings to masks. So let's add it to the material. We can add it here as the matte 2 height. Up here we should decrease the use noise as height texture for matte 2 to something like 0.4. Now we are starting to see the pattern. It's too big right now. Let's make it smaller. Something like 0.1 works just fine. To better see the pattern, we should increase the height texture multiplier of matte 2. 3.5 is good. Next I'll do the lighting, but before getting to that, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also join our communities on Telegram, Discord and Facebook. You can ask questions or answer them, share your work in progress and more. If you're interested in supporting the channel and downloading the project file for this video, check out my Patreon. The links are in the description. For lighting, I have two references. The first one is this Instagram page with dark shades. I love the blue lighting in his images, and then in some others we see an orange light. He uses one of the most used color schemes, complementary colors. The other is a technique I read about in this online book. I recommend you all read it. CG Cinematography by Chris Brejon. I hope I'm not butchering his name. It's a great book. Chapter 6 has this section about negative spaces. Having darker objects in the foreground and brighter objects in the background will give depth to your shot. And then down here in this example, we can clearly read foreground, middle ground and background in terms of exposure and temperature. This is what I'm gonna do. So I want the main light of the scene to be blue, the foreground I'll make darker, and in the background I'll put a large orange light source. Again, I have to say that I've worked on this environment a few times before recording this video, so I know what I want. I'll still explain why I do certain things, so you don't just copy the values I input. Try to play around and find what works best for your environment. Let's start with the environment lights. Right now the main light source is the directional light or the sun. Let's set its color to blue. And increase the temperature to something like 8000. It makes it cooler. Let's also increase the source angle so the shadows become softer. That's better. It controls the size of the light source. The larger a light source, the softer its shadows. Search for cloud and enable cast cloud shadows. Can you see the difference? Select the exponential height fog and enable volumetric fog. We should increase the view distance to see its effect. Set it to 15,000. The post-process volume we'll use in the end when all the lighting is done. I still want the scene to be darker, and the sky atmosphere can help us with that. Mie scattering is the result of the interaction of light with larger particles, so if we increase both its scattering scale and absorption scale, we can get some interesting results. Let's set both of them to 1. Finally, let's set the sky color to a low saturated blue. And increase its intensity a little bit. 1.5 is good. So these were the environment lights. Let's add some extra lights. I'll add a rec light up here. Move it to the center in both X and Y. And rotate it 90 degrees so it lights the ground. Because the environment is so large, I'm going to need to use very high values for the size and the intensity of the lights. So if your environment is smaller, keep this in mind when entering the numbers. Let's start with its width and height. The width I'm gonna set to 1000 and the height I'm gonna set to 4000. Set the attenuation radius to 10,000 so it reaches the ground. Unreal unit is centimeters, so 10,000 unreal units equal 100 meters, which is the height of the pillars. Increase the intensity to 15,000. Let's actually increase the attenuation to 12,000. That's better. Just like the sun, I'll set the color to blue. Make it less saturated. Enable temperature and set it to 8000. Enable the grid snapping and set it to 1000. Disable the snapping, duplicate the light and enable it again. Move one of them to the right and one of them to the left. Now I'm gonna increase the volumetric scattering on both of them. 30 looks fine. Let's create an orange bright light in the background. I'm gonna use two sources of light, an emissive object and a rake light. Let's copy one of the pillars and move it here so it covers the whole entrance. For the material, I'm gonna use my free master material. It's available on my website. Create a material instance and move it to the folder you want. Assign it to the pillar and open it. We're just gonna need to adjust the base color and the emissive sections. Set the base color to a red-orange color. Copy it and paste it on the emissive tint. Increase the emissive intensity. 50 is good. We could set it to a higher number like 500. But it creates artifacts, so let's stick with 50 for now. Click on perspective to see through the camera. Let's scale the emissive object just in case we need to move it. We can also add a pattern to it. Let's add it to the emissive texture. By default nothing happens because texture amount is 0. But as I increase it, we start to see the pattern. Set it to 1. Let's look at it from the outside to better see it. I'm gonna decrease the size from here. 0.15 is good. And let's offset it a little bit so the pattern is right in the middle. Now because of the pattern, the emissive intensity is low. I'll just set it to 1000. Let's go back to the camera. Actually, let's decrease it. 200 is better. Now we can see the pattern. Copy one of these lights and move it in front of the bright pillar. Rotate it so it faces the scene and move it down like this. Copy the Z location of the pillar and paste it here so the light is right in the middle. Set its height to 10,000 and its width to 600. Okay, now set its color to orange and its temperature to 3000. The attenuation radius is too high right now. Let's decrease it. $9,000 is good. I'll increase the intensity to 20,000 and decrease the volumetric scattering to something like 10. Let's actually increase the intensity to 50,000 and decrease the volumetric scattering to 5. Copy one of these lights, move it to the center and move it down. Bring its volumetric scattering down to 0 actually. I want it to just help with the lighting, not affect the atmosphere. Let's duplicate it one more time and move it down. This one I want to only affect the ground. So search for channel, disable channel 0 and enable channel 1. Let's also enable channel 1 on the ground. Now we can see its effect. Some bad shadows may appear on the ground. It's a nanoid tessellation issue, so I think it will be fixed in future versions. For now, I'll disable cast shadow on the ground mesh. The ground is almost flat, so we don't need it to cast shadow. Let's decrease the light intensity. $6,500 is good. Let's open the material of the ground. In the snow section, let's decrease the normal strength. Something like 0.4 is good. Now that's better. After adding the last light to better see the ground, the pillar shadows kinda disappear. It doesn't look good. So to fix that, I've used the trick. I've duplicated all the pillars and put them in a folder. I've named the folder hidden. I'm gonna tell you why. Let's select the duplicated pillars. In the details, search for hidden. I've enabled both hidden shadows and actor hidden in game. Now when we press G or render the scene, the duplicated pillars will be hidden, but they will cast shadow. The last thing we should do is to enable channel 1 lighting and disable channel 0, which I've already done. And yeah, looks so much better now. Let's add a little bit of bloom. In the post-process volume, search for it. I'll set the method to convolution and the intensity to 1. Let's also decrease the convolution scatter dispersion to 0.5. The convolution method is more expensive. It's intended for cinematics. Now because of the placement of the lights, the foreground is darker, so we don't need to do anything about it. In this part, I'll add details to the environment and turn it from this to this. Let's start with sculpting the ground. I want to add some more detail to the bottom of the pillars, like a snow is piled there. Select the mesh. In the modeling mode, go to the deformation section and select vertex sculpt. Let's decrease the size and disable the symmetry option. Also set the strength to 0.1. And now we can sculpt around the pillars. Click on accept and it's done. I've downloaded these decals from Quixel Bridge. We can use them to add extra details all over the place. I'll add these concrete damages to the pillars and these debris and scattered foliage to the ground. So let's spend some time and add them to the environment. Make sure to scale and rotate them to create variations. These are the foliage I'm gonna use. All of them are from Quixel. Their foliage static mesh is already set up when we import them. I've put the ones I want to use in a collection so they're easier to find. The only thing I've changed in their settings is the density and the scale. I've also enabled channel 1 and channel 2 for their lighting. Channel 1 is because I want them to be lit with the light I added for the ground, and channel 2 is because I want to add some lights specifically for the foliage. So let's go to the foliage mode, add all of them here, enable them, and start painting. Keep enabling and disabling the foliage, change the paint density, and paint until you're satisfied with the result. Okay, that's enough. The foliage in the foreground is too dark. I want them to be dark, but not this much. So let's duplicate this light and move it over here. I want it to only affect the foliage, so in the details, search for channel, disable channel 1 and only enable channel 2. The intensity is too high. Let's set it to something low like 100 or 200. Set it to something low like 500. I want it to just affect the foliage a little bit. Let's rotate it like this and move it down. Oh, not that much. Hide and unhide it to better see its effect. Okay. Duplicate it here and move it down. Rotate it like this. And let's set this one to something like 200, 100. Okay, that's much better. I ended up setting the first one to 300 and the second one to 100. Now let's add wind to the foliage. It's actually easy. Just open the material of the foliage. Down here we have the wind section. Let's enable it. We can already see the animation, and now we can tweak these parameters to better adjust it. I went ahead and added wind to all the foliage. I've downloaded these concrete rubbles from Quixel. Let's use the foliage tool to scatter them around the pillars. Add them to the foliage tool like this. Let's enable only the concrete rubble. I'll just change the scale settings. Set the min to 0.5 and the max to 5. Also enable the other two lighting channels for them. And let's paint them. This bigger concrete is good for breaking the pattern. Let's add it. Set its scale and lighting channels. This one I'll add with the single mode. I don't want a whole bunch of them, just one or two around each pillar. I spent some time and edited the foliage, deleted some of them and added some more foliage along the path. Right click in the content browser under FAX, select Niagara system. In this new window we can select a system as the base for what we want to create. Hanging particulates is a great starting point for what I want. So let's create the system, name it, and open it. This is mostly what I want. I'm just gonna change some of the settings and add some new ones. For starters, we don't need a sprite renderer, so let's delete it and add a mesh renderer. In the details, we can add the meshes we want to use. I'm gonna use 5 of the concrete rubbles. So let's add 5 elements here and add the meshes to them. Let's continue editing the particle system in an empty level. We're gonna add it to the main level when we're happy with it. Okay, so right now they keep disappearing and appearing again. Let's first fix that. Under emitter state, I'm gonna change the loop behavior to once so they only spawn once. And under particle state, I'm gonna uncheck kill particles and I'm gonna enable loop particle lifetime. Now they will only spawn once, so we won't have rubbles popping out of nowhere and they won't disappear. Let's add some randomness to the scale. Under initialize particle, set the mesh scale mode to uniform and from here click on this small arrow here and search for random. This is what I want, random range float. I'm gonna set the minimum to 0.2 and the maximum to 1.6. That's better. Now let's edit the forces. Under wind force, increase the wind speed scale to something like 3. Add a mesh rotation. Change the coordinate space to local and the rotation to random. Random range vector. I'll set the minimum to 0.05 in all axes and the maximum to 0.3. That's better. We should set the shape location size based on the environment. I'll set the box size to 3000 by 3000 by 1000 and let's set the spawn rate to 100. Now let's add it to the level. I'll place it in the middle somewhere around here. We can further tweak the settings if we need to. Change the scale, the speed, or the spawn rate to control the number of rubbles floating around. The cable actor is provided within the engine. Here search for it and it's there. Let's drag it in the level and move it here on the wall. Here in the component section, click on cable component and now we can change the end location. Now it looks like a straight line. It's not good. In the details tab, we only need to change 4 of these parameters. In the cable rendering section, I'll set the cable width to 15 and num size to 8. Up here I'll increase the number of segments to 30 and the most important parameter is the cable gravity scale. I'll set it to 20. Let's look through the camera and move the cable up. Okay, it's looking good. Now let's copy it a couple of times. And randomly change the cable gravity scale on each of them. And start copying these 4 cables. To add more variation, I'll randomly move some of the end locations I actually forgot to assign a material to the cables, so let's duplicate the emissive material and open it. Set the emissive intensity to 0 and the emissive texture amount to 02. Set the base color to black. and the roughness to 0.7. Now select all the cables and assign the material. Up here, search for local fog and add it to the level. Let's decrease its height fog density to 0.15. .3 is better. Increase the height fog falloff to around 1500 and let's scale it a little bit. That's better. Now let's place it randomly between the pillars. That's enough. Before and after. It's a subtle touch, but enhances the look of the scene. A good character can help enhance the visual narrative of the shot. It can better communicate the experience and the feeling of the space to the viewer. What it's like to be there, how it feels. For the character, I'll just explain what I did. I made the cloak in Marvelous Designer and imported it into Unreal Engine as a skeletal mesh. Then I added clothing data. The hat is a free model I downloaded on the internet, and the fabric materials are from Quixel. If your model is a simple plane, make sure its material is two-sided. I use the default mannequin as the character. I could use a metahuman character, and maybe I will for the future videos, but in this case the default mannequin works just fine. Then I added them all to a blueprint. For the mannequin animation, I used the idle pose and unchecked playing so it doesn't move. Then I placed the cloak and the hat on the character. So let's delete this character and add the new one. Rotate it and place it in the middle. Let me show you how to simulate the cloak. Add a wind direction source to the level. Rotate it like this. And adjust the strength and the speed. These values work just fine. Now if I simulate the level from here, we can see the cloak moving. Sequencer will render anything that is simulated, so we will have the wind animation in the final render too. Right now the character's shadow on the ground is weak. It looks fine, but let me show you how to make it look better. Select all the components from here. Search for channel and enable channel 1. Now the shadow looks much better. From the camera's view, we see the character as a silhouette. I could add a couple of lights around it, but in this case I want it to be a dark shape against the brighter background. It helps to make the character more readable and better direct the viewer's eye. Again, you can read more about it in the CG cinematography book. Sequencer gives us the ability to create cinematics. We can use it to animate stuff. Right click in the content browser and under cinematics, create a level sequence. Open it and let's dock it here next to the content browser. Drag the first camera into it and it automatically creates a camera cut. From here, set the sequence display rate to 24 fps. I want to animate the location of the camera, so let's first unlock its location. Here in the sequencer, under transform, we have the location. I want to just animate it in the x-axis. Let's move it a little bit. Around here is good. I want the camera to start from here, so let's add a keyframe. I want the sequence to be 6 seconds long. 6 times 24 is 144. So let's move to frame 144 and set the playback end to here. Also extend the camera cut. Move the camera and a new keyframe will be added. If it wasn't added, click here to add one. select the keyframes, right click, and under key interpolation, select linear. Feel free to try the other ones too. I'll go with linear most of the time. So let's play the sequence. We can also add camera shake to it. I have a couple of free presets on my website. Let's add one to the camera. Move to frame 0. Here click on the plus icon, and under camera shake we can find the camera shake blueprints. Let's add the first one. Extend it so it covers the whole sequence, and click on play to see how it looks. This one is not good. Let's delete it and try one of the other ones. Both of them look good. I'm gonna go with the second one. Now let's render the sequence. First, make sure the Movie Render Queue plugin is enabled. If it's not, enable it and restart the project. In the sequencer, click here and the Movie Render Queue window opens. Sequence 1 is automatically added, and if we click here, these are my presets. You can download them for free on my website. I usually test render with the low quality preset, and when I'm happy with the result, use the high quality. So let's test it. Click on render local. It compiles the shaders. Then it starts rendering it. Right off we can see that the cables are moving. So let's cancel it. Click here to open the preset settings. To avoid this, we should increase the number of warm-up frames. In the anti-aliasing section, under Advanced, we have the warm-up count settings. Let's set the engine warm-up count to a high value, like 1000. If I hover the mouse on top of it, it says that it allows pre-warming systems such as particle systems or level loading, which need time to run before you want to start capturing frames. The cables have physics enabled, that's why they swing. So by setting a high number here, we give them 1000 frames to finish swinging. Click on accept, then click on render. Now we can see the warm-up frames. And the cables are not swinging anymore. Let's give it some time to render. It's the test render, so it shouldn't take much time. After the render is finished, click here to open the folder where the image sequence has been saved. Open the first one and move through them to see if it's okay. Except for the first few frames where we have this issue, it's fine. It's probably because of the large emissive object we have in the scene. There is something we can do about it. In the sequencer, drag everything 24 frames forward. Make sure the camera shake starts from frame 24 too. Now if I render it, the first 24 frames can be discarded. So let's change the preset to high quality. In the anti-aliasing section, set the spatial sample count to 8. And temporal sample count to 2. Set the engine warm-up to 1000, and under console variables, set the screen percentage to 150. 200 takes a lot of time. Accept and render. Actually, the camera cut should be from frame 0, so let's edit it and click on render again. And now the render has finished. Let's delete the first 24 frames from frame 0 to frame 23. And finally, we should turn the image sequence into a video and then color grade it a little bit. For that, I'm gonna use Davinci Resolve. Drag and drop the image sequence into Davinci Resolve's media pool. It automatically turns it into a video. Drag it into the timeline and let's see how it looks. Great. Down here, select the Color tab. Color grading in Davinci Resolve is node based. We can add new nodes here and edit them. I've used these nodes to turn it from this to this. I've increased the contrast and the saturation a little bit and added halation, glow and vignette to it. These are the settings I've used for halation. These are the settings I've used for glow. And these are the settings for vignette. After we're done editing the color, we can render the final video in the Deliver tab. Click here to learn how to create this automotive cinematic, and thank you so much for watching. Like this video, subscribe and join our communities on Telegram, Discord and Facebook. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. So, see you in the next one.